both in English and Romanian. I will read it first in Romanian, and then I will give you the idea of it in English.
Oh, no.
No, it's not my own poem, it's a poem. It's a poem by Ana Blandiana. Probably some of them might have heard of her. She's a sort of Carol Ann Duffy, our Romanian Carol Ann Duffy. She is well known, she's famous in Romania and all over the world, as far as I know. And she wrote this poem, and I thought that being November, it would be a good opportunity to pay my respects and our respects to the soldiers who sacrificed, and all the people who sacrificed their lives in the First World War and the Second World War, and to try to connect it with the present, with what you probably know, that has been a terrible accident, that was an accident 3 weeks ago in Bucharest, when a fire destroyed a nightclub. And then to connect it with the events in Paris, and let's hope that will be the last ones. So, in Romanian, it sounds like that. Ar trebui să ne naștem bătrâni, să venim înțelepți, să fim în stare de a hotărî soarta noastră în lume, să știm din răscrucea primară ce drumuri pornesc și responsabil să fie doar dorul de a merge. Apoi să ne facem mai tineri, mergând. Maturi și puternici să ajungem la poarta creației, să trecem de ea și în iubire, intrând adolescenți, să fim copii la nașterea fiilor noștri. Oricum ei ar fi atunci mai bătrâni decât noi. Ne-ar învăța să vorbim, ne-ar legăna să dormim. Noi am dispărea tot mai mult, devenind tot mai mici, cât bobul de strugure, cât bobul de mazăre, cât bobul de grâu. And in English it says, we should be born old, we should turn up wise, be able to decide our fate in this world, to know which roads commence from that original crossroad, and only our longing to travel be deemed irresponsible. Then we should grow younger, and younger still while traveling. Mature and strong, we should arrive at the gate of creation, pass through it, enter it as teenagers into love, and be children when our children are born. They'll be older than us by then anyway. Teach us how to talk, rock us to sleep. We would disappear little by little, grow smaller little by little, like a grape berry, like a pea seed, like a wheat grain.
Thank you, that's beautiful. And we're just going to have two of the guys reading Mark Cassidy's poems, because he's not here tonight. And then we'll have a question and answer. So it's Gareth first.
Mark has a perfectly valid excuse for not being here. It's his daughter's 21st birthday. Skimmer. Much is in the choosing. How shape fits the curve of thumb and index finger, the weight in your palm. The smoother, the better. Stone and water both, to amplify the bounces as spin and tension clash. When flick releases flat, as leaning knees allow, then ripples splash the surface, dance in liquid rings, over tumbled lifetimes by billion-fold collision. Tide worn, a pebble, waits for you to throw it.
Pietricica. Depinde mult de ceea ce alegi. Cum forma ei se potrivește la curba dintre degetul mare și cel arătător, greutatea ei în palma ta, cu cât mai netede, cu atât mai bine, și piatra și luciul apei. Pentru a amplifica bolta când torsiunea și forța se intersectează. Atunci când aruncarea este scurtă, atât cât ți-au permis genunchii îndoiți, mici valuri se formează la suprafață, un dans de inele lichide. De-a lungul vremurilor tumultoase, lovită de talazuri nesfârșite, de miliarde de ori, o pietricică te așteaptă să o arunci.
This is Mark's other poem, Falling. It is hard to pinpoint when I missed my footing and could no longer walk apart from you. Perhaps it began with a fern unfurling from clenched fist into kiss, asking and answering its own question. But I fancy our season to be that of hedges, ripening between start of new school years and the first bare branches. Every autumn the litter deepens and we kick through, sweep clear, our rustling path reset by what's been learned. Held in the circle of your smile, always I'm catching up, cupping my ear for echo of our courting song, or, like a waterfall, the resonance of your laughter, tumbling just a hand's reach away.
În cădere. E greu să iau decizii când mi-am pierdut echilibrul și nu mai pot să mă îndepărtez de tine. Poate că a început cu o ferigă care crește de la pumnul încleștat la sărut, punând întrebări și dând răspunsuri la propriile întrebări. Dar îmi imaginez că anotimpul nostru este cel al gaturilor vii ajunse la maturitate, între începutul unui nou an de școală și primele ramuri rămase fără frunze. Cu fiecare toamnă sunt tot mai multe rămășițe și le lovim cu piciorul, îndepărtându-le din cale. Cărarea noastră ce foșnește, reînnoită prin ceea ce am învățat. Captiv în cercul zâmbetului tău, încerc mereu să nu rămân în urmă, cu palma făcută pâlnie la ureche, ca să aud ecoul cântecului nostru de început. Sau, ca o cascadă, rezonanța hohotului tău de râs, ce se rostogolește la doar un pas de mine.
Thank you. And thank you for all the poems. I mean, it's fabulous to hear.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's such an honor for me to be here tonight.
We have a question and answer session now. I'll ask a couple of questions to start things off, and obviously, the questions we've got, please shout out. Were there any particular challenges you had in terms of translating these poems?
Well, I had some problems, I must confess. One of them was definitely with Mark's poem Skimmer, because I didn't know what to make out of skimmer. There is no such word. I got the idea. We have the thing in Romanian, but there is no word in the Romanian dictionary for skimmer. And it wasn't after I read the poem and I translated it, I left the title for last. And then I realized that I didn't know what it was all about. Was it all about the pebble, or was it about the person who was throwing the pebble? And then in the end, after Mark wrote back and gave me the explanations, I decided to trick a little and to spoil the mystery. And instead of the right word, which doesn't exist in Romanian, I just chose little stone or the pebble, just to make it clearer from the very beginning. And then I had a problem with, with Pauline's poem, with fruit, with bird fruit? Yes. I was quite puzzled. I didn't know what to expect or what to make of that. And then I said, please, Pauline, could you please explain what birth fruit is? And she said, well, it's just the next generation of tangerines. Should have thought of that. What else? I had another problem. Oh, yes, with Maggie's poem. But we haven't read it. So no, there was the poem, The War, and there was this expression, pin-pocked, which again I couldn't find anywhere, and I didn't know what to make of it. And then Maggie explained that it's about when you take out pictures and everything of the walls, and there are those little holes, and then I decided just to maybe you should read it first.
You got it?
just a second. I have it here.
Wall. I'm tempted to knock a nail into your silence, disturb your smugness with an old beveled mirror, or Goya's painting of the disconsolate dog. But I won't, no. I will sit in the lotus like a yogi before you, contemplate your pin-pocked plainness, instruct my bones in the art of stillness, cast from my memory my father's hunched shoulders, my mother's lost hat. I'll sit there so long my nails will yellow and curl, and you'll begin to moulder, until the day that you, me, the world and its dog transmute into an echoless blue. So what do you say to that? You all know what pin-pocked plainness would be, don't you? Like these walls here.
Yeah, I cheated a bit here, and I said the plainness of the old holes, because there wasn't such a word again in Romanian to get the idea, the exact idea of the poem. And in Romanian it sounds like this. Peretele. Sunt tentată să bat un cui în tăcerea ta, să-ți tulbur trufia cu un joc de oglindă veche, sau cu tabloul câinelui neconsolat al lui Goia. Dar nu voi face. Nu. Voi ședea în fața ta ca un ioghin în poziția lotus. Voi contempla simplitatea găurilor vechi. Îmi voi învăța oasele arta seninătății. Îmi voi alunga din memorie umerii ridicați ai tatălui meu, pălăria pierdută a mamei mele. Voi ședea acolo atât de mult timp, încât unghiile mele se vor încălbeni și se vor curba, iar tu vei începe să te descompui. Până în ziua în care tu, eu, lumea și câinele ei ne vom muta într-un albastru fără ecou. Deci, ce ai de spus despre asta? There are some challenges.
One other question, and then I'll open out to the floor. When you're looking at a poem to start translating it, how do you decide between meaning and sound, rhythm? What do you look at when you translate a poem, first of all?
First I try to get the idea, and then I try to picture the image to visualize the poem. And then I first make a rough translation, And afterwards I start playing with words and try to... the thing is that Romanian is more permissive from this point of view. English has a very strict word order. In Romanian there is no such thing. Romanian is a very chaotic language given the fact that it's a Latin language and it has Greek, Russian, Turkish influences. So each influence has changed the language. In a way, it has enriched it, but on the other hand, it has become very chaotic. And from this point of view, it's very easy to translate poems into Romanian because I could play with words and I could find the right place for each word so that not to lose its musicality and to make it harmonious. I don't know if it sounded well.
Yes. Sounded lovely.
Yes. Thank you.
So, questions from the floor?
Yes, I've got a question. You have a poem in front of you in one language, English, with all that underpins that language, everything that it contains, and then you move it into, you recast it in a different language with all that contains and is underpinned by it. What happens to the poem? Does it stay the same? Does it change? Does it become something different, something richer, something stranger? What happens to it? Or is it the same poem?
I try to keep the same poem as much as possible because you know what they say, and I'm guilty of that, like all the translators. It's traduttore, traditore. It's translator, traitor. It's impossible not to betray the original. But I try to keep it as little as possible. And I try to interfere as little as possible. And that's why it's easier to translate contemporary poets, because you can collaborate. Translation has become a collaborative enterprise now. So it's easier to do that these days. So I try not to interfere. If it's very difficult, I'll just leave it to some experts.
When you're translating, you may come up to a word, and in the other language there may be two words that could be. How do you decide which of those two words that you translate into? How do you decide? Because often there are two words that are almost the same, but it must be very difficult now.
Well, most of the time I must confess that I keep both with a slash between them. And I just leave it there for a while, and then I go back every now and then. I go back to the poem and read it again, and then reread it. And then in the end I read it out loud to see how it sounds. So, that is if I don't check the dictionary.
Can I just say that I think that's the same way you're writing a poem. Often two words might do.
Mm-hmm.
And you do the same. In the end, you think which one sounds better. I think it's a kind of similar process.
It is.
I would say, would you?
Yeah.
I have a question.
First.
Great. You've got a question? There's an American poet called Jerome Rothenberg, and he's 83, but he's still translating. He says, and I wondered if you would agree with him, that it's easier to translate if you just stick with one poet and you keep working on their poems and you sort of get inside their head, inside their body, and that's what he finds. How do you feel about that?
I would strongly disagree, with your permission. I don't want to be in anybody's mind or body. Mine are enough. So I prefer working with many poems and with many poets because it gives you an idea of each person's sensibility and each person's experience, and it's a much more challenge. It's much more challenging instead of working with just one single person and one single artist. I mean, sometimes we get bored of ourselves. Why should we get bored of another person?
Thank you, that's an interesting answer there.
Thank you.
In Pauline's poem, she uses tangerine and makes a reference to it sounding like tambourine. How does that work in Romanian?
Well, in Romanian, tangerines are mandarine, which is, it sounds a bit, it's like mother and father, if you want, because in Romanian we say mama, tata. So it's like tangerines, mandarine. It's a bit softer, if you ask me.
But what's tambourine in Romanian?
There wasn't any.
Yeah,
Tambourine.
it's not a specific word, but there's
Well, tambourine.
a musical.
It's the same as in English. Tambourine is a musical instrument.
Okay.
So I just wondered from the basis that mandolin in Romanian.
Mandolina.
So translated, it works.
Yes. But most of the times it works because both English and Romanian have Latin roots. So wherever was possible, I tried to find Latin equivalent, something more with a common ground.
We probably have time for one more question. At the back. Always at the back.
I went to a really, I thought, interesting talk by the former Archbishop of Canterbury, who translates a lot of poetry, Rowan Williams. And he said, and I don't know why he said this, and I want to know if it resonates with you or not. He said you can change the metaphor when you're translating poetry, but never change the order of the story. Does that make any sense with you? Because I didn't know, because I've never done it. I've never done that translation. So my daughter has done some translation of poetry, used it into lots of languages and stuff, and she understood that, but what is in that, if anything?
It is true. It is true. Sometimes you have to use different metaphors, but the idea is not to change the story. Because it wouldn't resonate with the readers, with the listeners. And most of the times they do resonate, but sometimes a poem may express something which is completely different from a nation's or a person's experience or background, and they might not be able to understand a certain feeling or a certain event in the life of a different nation. For instance, in Romania, at least, African poetry is not translated very much. Instead, we translate European poetry, American poetry. The poetry lovers, the readers of poetry in Romania are very interested in English, French, German, Italian, Spanish poetry, and mostly American poetry. I mean, if you met a student in English literature, he would tell you or she would tell you everything possible about American literature. Because we tend to look at them as the model. Yeah, which is not fair, I know. That's why I'm trying to do my best to promote British poetry. But I would have a question for you, if you don't mind, which is related to my own research. Would you prefer it to be called British poetry or English poetry?
Yes.
You know what?
How about a vote?
English
No,
language.
it's becoming political now, please.
Portsmouthian, I think.
No, I'm from Southampton.
Now the thing is that if you check, if you
English.
Poetry from the South Coast.
What do you mean by that?
well,
Vote for English.
speak.
No, what do you mean by? Do you mean what's the sort of what's the reason for the question?
It's. I was thinking that during my research, I have preferred to use the word English. Just thinking of poets like Patience at Barbie, for instance, or Grace Nichols, who come from, or Maria Eszczemska, who comes from Holland, and they all write in English. So I would call them English poets. But if you Google English poetry or English poets, you will find out even American poets, because they're considered as poets writing in English. But if you search British poets, you will find precisely these names of poets born or adopted by England and who write in English. So I'm a bit in two minds now. I really don't know what to use any longer.
Can I make a suggestion here?
Please.
I can see the compromise. Having a Hungarian daughter-in-law who now and again really gets hung up on a peg with English. And I think we're trying to discriminate here between the English language, which is American English, Australian, New Zealand, and English as a nation. So really we're talking about English language and British poetry, yes?
That sounds good.
Well, except that, in addition to that, English can be a kind of a national identity, but it's a very weak one, whereas Scottish is a very strong national identity. And Welsh. So you might have Welsh poetry in the English language, and it would be quite fiercely Welsh.
Wouldn't it?
But so there are three kind of things here. There's the geographical location of something that comes from England. There's a national identity and there's a language play. But I don't think anyone here would say that English and British are interchangeable terms.
Yeah. We're going to have to put a line in there because we have to have some music. Thank you for your questions, and thank you again, Elena, for a lovely evening.
Thank you.